Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Today, I've got a wonderful guest with us today. His name is Brian Swichkow, like the company. But he's here today to talk to us about Reddit marketing. As you know, a lot of the audience here is we're all content publishers, and most of us, we know about Reddit, but at the same time, we're a little bit scared of Reddit. So I think Brian, it's hard to say who's an expert at Reddit, but I think Brian might qualify as one of those people. So Brian, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are and why we brought you on here.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on. I am excited to talk about it, talk about Reddit, and basically validate all of your fears, and then tell you how to navigate around them. I'm the founder of Ghost Influence, which is kind of three parts. We have a marketing community, we're a marketing agency, and we are a marketing incubator, the last of which is kind of just commercial validation for creating drunken ideas. And then putting some kind of commercial intent behind them so that I can justify doing them. Much of what we do is with Reddit and kind of playing with that audience. And the reason for that is partially because back in 2014, I got internet infamous for pranking my roommate with Facebook ads, a story which I published on Reddit, and then it hit the top of the our marketing community, went to the front page, which was super cool. But it also drove 30,000 backlinks and about 7 million earned media impressions. And now in 2018, 4 years later, I still get people contacting me being like, I just read your roommate prank, like we should talk. So it's really the gift that keeps on giving. And watching how that story spread really made me look at Reddit differently, because it wasn't, it was done very strategically, but it was also fun. And so really kind of figuring out that process became my new obsession. And over time, I became known as the Reddit marketing guy. And what I tell Redditors when they kind of challenge me on that, usually when they find me on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn tagline is Reddit marketing expert. And I'll get the inevitable, prompt from a Redditor. And they're like, oh yeah, how does one go about marketing on Reddit? And I was like, oh, great question. I was like, it's actually it's actually just like stage magic. I'm just tricking companies into having them give me their marketing budget so that I can entertain you. And they're like, okay. So it's really what it is. It's strategic contribution. It's figuring out how you can create something that is of interest, and then making it the best way possible. And there's ways that you can research that and find out where you fit. But that's kind of the moral of the story is they have very specific conditions as to what they applaud in each individual subreddit, and understanding that and then determining whether or not you can, beat those previous records of like, this is the best cat gif we have ever seen. All right, what's the second, or what can beat that? And at the end of the day, it's just creation. So it's a fun process.
Awesome. Let's take it back a little bit into the gift that keeps on giving. How about that? Because that's kind of what you're known for, at least probably mostly. I'm sure you're known for a lot of different things, but that's initially how I came to hear about Brian Swichkow. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story, how that all went, and what that's kind of led you into?
Yeah, so I had a marketing agency. I fell out of love with the type of clients that I was working with, and the work that I was doing. And they were selling info products through personal brand. And I kind of got to this point where I was like, I can do this. At the time, not really comfortable on camera. Now I'm more comfortable, but when someone emails me and says, would you like to share things on camera? I'm like, sure, fine. But if, I'm like, I'm going to create a video course where I'm on camera for 10 hours. That sounds terrible to me. So I just kind of jumped into let's create a personal brand more just because I wanted to see if I could. It wasn't out of ego. It wasn't out of, like wanting everybody to see me. It was, I want to create, I want to write. I don't want to promote someone else's creativity and someone else's writing. And my mantra for the longest time has been build cool shit and change the world, not necessarily in that order. And so I just wanted to justify building cool shit, regardless of what that was. So I started a marketing agency by a terrible name. It was My Social Sherpa, which was my cop out for finding an ideal domain, just to eliminate procrastination. And kind of thought, I was like, what's the most unique value that I can provide? And I had a professor in college that was just he was entertaining and kind of like he captured your attention very, very effectively. And I remember his lessons not because they were useful subject matter, but because they were memorable. And so that plus a few other kind of circumstances were on my mind. And I was like, all right, well, everything that I've learned about marketing has come from some sort of experience. I didn't go to school for marketing. I went to school for graphic design. So everything that I learn has something attached to it where I was like, oh, okay, this is how the thing works. When I was a kid, I took apart blenders to learn how motors work. My parents still don't have a blender. Replacement, I should say. They bought a blender, but I owe them one. So that was kind of the philosophy behind it. And I thought about it and I was like, well, I have one story that I've told probably 100 times. It's like my go-to bar story. I've perfected the art of telling the story, not out of like a conscious, perfecting the comedic bit to the best, candor and tonality that's possible, but more just like I've told it so many times that I got used to telling it to all different types of people. And so I wrote it. But when I wrote it, I had just started looking into Reddit. I specifically digging into the Reddit marketing community, trying to understand the types of people that were there, the types of conversations that they had, and really just over time understood them to be like me, which is, analytical in their daily lives, but like with this desire to be creative, sarcastic and crass because, marketers know that humans are predictable. We're the ones that see it first. And then we use it and we're like, God, we're just slaves to our biology and psychology. And like, that's kind of the energy. And like, you have a few drinks with a marketer and next thing you know, you're talking about, screwing with people in ways that aren't usually bad, but always entertaining. And so that's the person that I wrote that story for. The story the content of the story didn't change. But what did change was the way in which I presented it, because the way that I told that story to my mom was very simplistic and very short. It was like, hey, my roommate? Yeah, well, the ads in the sidebar? Like I created a bunch of ads that only appeared for him and they were like super specific. My mom was like, oh, that's cool, sweetie. And then like conversation over. But when I wrote it for those people, it was 2,200 words of creative nonfiction, which at the time I did not know what creative nonfiction was, but that. So taking something that was interesting, making it really interesting with presentation, and then sharing it humbly.
How long did you run those ads for?
I ran them for 2 weeks initially. He suspected me of being the one to do it to him. And then I turned them all off because I didn't want him to see any more and get further clues that it actually was me. But then I got busy and forgot. So he had basically just gotten these like really creepy, super specific ads for 2 weeks and then nothing. And he had like no explanation what was happening, to the point where I think my personal favorite one, which is not published, is these were the best sheets for sleeping naked. Was probably because, like you're like, wait, how do they know that? And after 2 weeks, I turned him off. And then about a week after I turned them off, I noticed that he was really jumpy and paranoid. And that reminded me that I had screwed with him, but not told them that I had screwed with him. So I created a new ad to tell him, it's like, have you ever felt like your roommate's starting ads to a niche of just you? And that was my like big reveal. But yeah, I mean, I did that well before I ever had the idea to create a blog. Well before I ever thought about writing. I did that because I'm a sadistic person that happens to have had an opportunity for retaliation. He started it. I always have to clarify. It was retaliation. I did not just do that on my own accord. He started it. I ended it. So that was just something I did for fun. That was like our humor. He screwed with me in an equivalently well thought out way. And the story came after that, right? Like the article came after I just did it for fun. It was who I was, is who I am. And so that's kind of when I teach marketing. I'm like, look, you got to figure out who you are, what your personality is, what your character is. And same goes for the brand. And then you create within that persona.
So on this call here, there's probably, there's only two of us right now, and one of us knows Reddit a lot more than the other person, which I think is you. So let's talk about what you define Reddit to be, because I think probably what you thought of it previously maybe has changed, but I'm interested in hearing your own definition of what Reddit really means for you.
Yeah, when I got into it, I didn't really have a formal definition. The reason that I got into it was when I was launching my blog. I was like, well, I can pay for traffic or I can get a bunch of free traffic, and I am typically cheap. So if I can get it for free, I'll work exponentially harder to get something for free than I will to just pay for it and get it. Currently, I'm trying to get a motorcycle helmet sponsorship just because I think it would be funny that I would be sponsored by a motorcycle company, which not your typical like motorcycle dude. So anyway, with that kind of notion, I was like, all right, well, I hear that you can get this like server crushing traffic from Reddit, and the Reddit hug of death. And I use air quotes because at the time I didn't know what that was. And as I started to dig into Reddit, I very frustrated with the UX, but kind of pushed through to, like a gym membership. I was like, this is uncomfortable, but I'm gonna figure it out. And after a while, you start to see the beauty of the content and the structure and the communities and the engagement, and it gets really addicting. And yeah, so I didn't have a definition but the definition I have now is thus. Reddit is a democratic platform with a number of communities and sub-communities. So Reddit as a whole is a community, then all the subreddits there within are also sub-communities. You have general communities like our GIFs and our awe, AWW, is just anything that makes you go awe. I was speaking at USC yesterday, I pulled that up, and literally the entire class goes awe, and I'm like, oh, you guys know this subreddit. Because that's like the default response. It's literally an emotional response is the name of it. It's not cute puppies, right? Because that's an analytical designation of what's being shown. It's the emotional response. It's what your body does. That's the name of this community. So it's really interesting how things like that are structured. This is my life now. Is like the look that a dog gives when it's like wearing a sweater, and it's just like, it's that look that's so relatable, and it's putting words to that. Or shut up and take my money is a really great one, which is from Futurama. But it's just a great response. It encapsulates so much in so little. And so basically what happens is people submit content. Anyone can submit. Communities can have anywhere between 100 people and 1 million people or more. And once the content is submitted, everyone who's in that community votes democratically up or down whether or not that content should exist in that community. So if you submit a cat to the awe subreddit, it's not a matter of whether or not that cat is adorable. It's a question of whether or not that cat is adorable by comparison to every cat that has ever previously been submitted to this community. And what's interesting about that is that you're constantly having this like socially elevated standard. My mom sent me a GIF at one point. It was a cat riding a Roomba, and I was like, Mom, hold on. It's like, here's a cat riding a Roomba. Here's a kitten riding a Roomba while wearing a shark costume and chasing a baby duck. And she's like, oh my God, that's so much more adorable. It's like, I know, right? So I have a greater education of what internet content is available as a result of Reddit. Therefore, my standards are higher because I know it exists. And it's the same with every Redditor. So what you're doing is you're trying to create content for the people who are the most educated about what content exists. They have the highest standards for what is great comedy, for what is great product, for what is great technology, for what is great information, for what is great political advocacy. They've consumed, and statistically speaking, they've consumed 10 times more external content, meaning content that's not related to their friends on the platform. Per page view. And so as people browse Reddit, they just consume, and consciously and subconsciously, they equate everything that they're looking at to everything that they've previously seen. So what will get you by on Facebook and Instagram will not go on Reddit. And that's kind of, I call the beauty, but I think I enjoy the challenge. Which is Reddit's like the top of Everest. Like you've got to have a fucking Sherpa, and you've got to have oxygen. You have to know that you could die at any point. And that's kind of, like how you go into it. You're like, all right, we're going to do this. And if you survive on the top of Everest, then anywhere else in the world, you're like, this is no big deal. And that's kind of what happened with my prank article, is that I figured out how to create something that could survive Everest, and then it survived and thrived everywhere else on Adweek and Business Insider and Forbes. And so I think I'm going to jump to the end of the question that you had listed, which is why do most businesses shy away from Reddit? That's largely it. They're forced to invest a lot into creation of any sort, with no qualitative metrics as to whether or not it will be worthwhile, right? They want to test. They want to, we'll have our designer do like a cool picture of our product with a cat, and then we'll submit that, and then we'll see if we can get some sales from that, and then no, that doesn't work on Reddit. What works on Reddit is just complete trust that if you appeal to this audience in the most, whatever way possible is an overwhelming investment, be it emotional, intellectual, financial, it's a contribution that you are making to a community, then you get to see how people respond to that. And a lot of big companies are scared off by the uncertainty of the investment. Other companies still, usually the mid to the small ones, are scared off by the possibility that it will be received negatively, which in my experience is usually because it's a lack of understanding of the platform. And so they're afraid of getting what they hear is backlash. And so they just don't take the time to understand the platform, or they have a lot of hesitations about it. A lot of the people that I work with, it's like part, yeah, those fears that you have, they're totally justified. Like you give no shits about your customers, you talk about them as money, like there's no emotional connection between the people that you're serving. You should not use Reddit. And then other people are just really interesting humans that are like, yeah, Reddit scares me. And I'm like, no, they'll fucking love you. Like you have you got stabbed protecting whales. That's awesome. And there's just a bunch of really great stories that are kind of prevented from getting to Reddit because of that. And yeah, it's a very different environment, and different is the worst way to explain something, but different is the best descriptor.
I think some key words that I pulled out of what you just said there is long-term. Long-term is it makes a lot of sense, because we talked about why corporations are afraid of generally taking a position inside of the Reddit community, right? Because a corporation is kind of like this big faceless type of thing, and it sounds like Reddit is a place where number one, transparency is quite high in Reddit. If we could take a tiny step back and kind of build upon what Brian said. So on top of what he mentioned, at the core foundation of what Reddit is it's a forum. It's a forum, and when he mentioned R, yeah. It's weird. It's R/AWW. Yeah.
Aw, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah. R/AWW. So that is when we talk about the R, that's a subreddit. So it's just it's kind of another section inside of Reddit, the entire forum, and it's a forum within the forum itself. I know this might be slightly confusing, but once you hop in it, you'll totally understand what
I wouldn't go that
we really
far.
mean about that. No,
you'll come to understand.
You just got to give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, honestly, it's a gym, so it's like it will be uncomfortable, it will be confusing, and it will be overwhelming. But spend 30 minutes a day for 30 days, then you'll become a Redditor and never leave.
For sure. And I do definitely agree that one of the aspects with Reddit is that the tier for content is extremely high, especially when you go into any of the subreddits. You can kind of go into the one section where it just says top, and you can organize everything from all-time, the all-time greatest upvotes, things that got upvoted, pieces of content or whatever it was, or discussions that got upvoted on there, and you really can see what people really like there. And to be honest with you, that's kind of a way for you to reverse engineer things, at least
that's not kind of a way, it is the way.
It is the way.
And that's the best part of it, right? From a marketing standpoint, is that if you go into a community, you can see what they consider to be the best ever. It's right there. Like, there's the data. And so I was talking about this yesterday and brought up the community Pareidolia, Paradolia, which pareidolia is the psychological phenomenon where you see faces in inanimate objects. And it's like how we're wired is to recognize faces. And so this whole community is people submitting photos of inanimate objects that look like faces. And the best thing that has ever been, I think actually the second best thing that has ever been submitted to that community of all time was 3 birds flying, where 2 birds had their wings down, which looked like eyes, and 1 bird had its wings up, which looked like a mouth. And then there were clouds covering a sunset, and it looked like 2 eyes and a mouth. And it was like perfect timing times 2. And they were like, 2 for 1. And like, you're like, okay, cool. If I'm trying to submit something to Pareidolia, that's the best ever. Does my thing or can my thing be better than that or close to that? We don't know. But that's kind of what you do when you're creating content, is you say, all right, where would this fit? What is the best ever in that community? Can I make my thing compete with those things? And if the answer is no, then go elsewhere.
If we take a second and we think about the fact that the majority of the people that are listening to this conversation are going to be content publishers and affiliate marketers, and those are almost the same thing, right? But generally, the people in our community are content publishers first, who happen to be monetizing their blogs with affiliate marketing, with ads, and that kind of stuff, right? So if we were to take that perspective and think about how we would kind of capture more eyes into our brand, how would we go about that? Like, what's the Reddit 101 of being a content publisher and making our way into there in the way that you would do it? How would you advise us to do that?
Well, first of all, I would give some context, which is that if you're a content publisher that's monetizing through affiliate relationships, and you go to a bar and you start talking to people at the bar, chances are you're probably not going to find a ton of people who understand by that language what it is that you do. Because you'll find doctors, lawyers, accountants, people in software, that don't understand business models for marketing, so on and so forth, right? Like, not everybody understands that language. It's very industry specific. Reddit largely does. Reddit's a very informed audience. So when they see ads on the sidebar, Redditors knew years ago how they were being targeted, and they would see that and be like, oh, you got my information from this. I, as a marketer, know that because I'm targeting people and I know how the system works because I use it. They are the recipients of those ads, and yet they still understand how the ads work. So if you drive a bunch of people to your content site, which is being monetized through affiliate relationships, Redditors will largely know that. They will be able to see the content and be like, this is a content site. This is someone who is making money by driving traffic in some form or fashion. They'll click on a link that's being referenced, and they'll see the ref code, and they'll be like, oh, okay, like affiliate site. So at that point, you're starting with the understanding that the people that you were talking to know how you make your money, which means if you're not bringing value, then they're not going to like you. Because if you're only there to make money off of them, it's very transparent to them. If you're only there to make money and you're not providing any other value, you will be banned, you will be attacked, you will be you are basically walking into, especially with like direct response or affiliate or anything like that. I usually equate it to walking into someone's living room and trying to like sign them up for a multi-level marketing company. It's very aggressive. Versus Facebook, like when you get hit with an ad that you don't want to see, you're just like, oh, okay, scroll to the next thing. On Reddit, it's very personal because you're not following people, right? On Facebook, you choose to follow someone. If they annoy you or you break up, then you unfollow them and you no longer see their content. On Reddit, you follow a topic, and so you see all of the content based on how it's voted. And if someone puts something that's not supposed to be there, you don't really have a way to not see it, aside from being like, no, this does not belong here, get out. So the psychology of it is very different. So lesson number one, if you can't bring true value, then try something else. And that could be a different kind of value, different kind of format, different story, which we'll go into in a little bit, or it could just be a different platform. But do not try and fit your square peg into Reddit's round hole. That's where you get in trouble. It's just rule number one. Beyond that, if you're a content marketer that is monetizing through affiliate relationships, I could have added affiliate relationships into my article about my roommate. I could have, you could have changed the story in slightly different ways to bring in a product or a service in some form. Oftentimes, it's more impactful from a story perspective to not expect that. When I launched my site, I very intentionally did not have an email list. I did not have an about page. I had an about paragraph. It was like, I'm an entrepreneur and marketer. I didn't have an about page because I didn't want people to understand too much about who I was, largely because I was trying to like reinvent myself and I was actually getting out of the multi-level marketing industry. So I didn't want to talk about my former clients because then it would be like, oh, he's an MLM guy, and I didn't want to be. So I basically didn't have anything to talk about, so I just didn't talk. So I focused on the content. Didn't have a call to action intentionally. Didn't have a lot of information as to who I was or why I had a blog. I wasn't soliciting work. And as a result of that, people dug to find it. And then they asked a lot of questions. So oftentimes removing elements of information can facilitate conversation. Having too much information can convey that you expected this type of traffic, which is kind of like having a bottle of wine and 2 wine glasses sitting on your coffee table when you go out to a date. If you take the date home, it's a bit presumptuous if you've already got the whole living room set up for her to come back to your place. So keep that in mind. That could work. Being too prepared can work against you. So I'd say that's rule number 2.
I like that analogy.
The third piece is what the content is. And if you're a content marketer creating for SEO, more content is better content because you're doing long tail backlinking, you're collectively amassing ownership of a space over time, so on and so forth. When you're creating a story for Reddit, none of that really matters. What matters is how much value you bring. So the fact that I spent 12 hours writing a 2,200 word piece that I spent 30 days researching, and I spent 45 minutes a day during that 30 minutes writing in a journal in order to like figure out how to write, like I'd never written before. So 45 minutes a day for a month plus 30 minutes a day. And I tracked all this because I set it as like a routine. I'm very routined. And then 30 minutes a day on Reddit to understand who I was speaking to, and then 12 hours to write this piece of content to this specific audience. So if you look at that investment for one 2,200 word piece, plus the 14 people that I asked after the fact for feedback and revisions, basically, 13 of which all said that it was amazing, which I was like, no one's giving me feedback. That has to be wrong. Right? Like everybody's just like likes me and they're saying that like, that's great, or my mom doesn't know anything about marketing, so I can take her feedback. So I finally had to go looking for someone who was in marketing that had skills that I respected. So I knew a lot of marketers that were better at different types of marketing, but not this type. So I was like, I don't know if I can take your advice. And I also needed to find someone who didn't like me. I was like set on this. And so the 14th person that I asked for feedback on this article was, and now I have to be cagey, was the head of marketing for a company that is now owned by a Fortune 50 company. So very accomplished in her field, that I met at a bar, who made it very clear that she was not interested in dating me. And I was like, great, like amazing skills, doesn't like me, has made it like abundantly clear. I'm like, hey, so I have a favor to ask. Can you like read this article? And she came back like 3 days later and she's like, this is brilliant. And I'm like, great. Like, if you're going to compliment me on that, then I know that, it's worth submitting. So, you figure out all the time involved in validating one piece of content before submitting. That is against every common practice in content marketing. And understanding that those two things are different. So your model for create content, own more keywords, build over time it's not wrong, it's just different. So Reddit is more what's the best story that you have that you consistently tell people, that someone hey, tell the hamburger story. Oh man, the fucking hamburger story. Like what is that story, and does that relate to who you are as a person, as a brand? Is it related to what you do? And how can you make it interesting? One of my many drunken sites is mastersofirreverence.com. And within that, there's a shirt called Mayonnaise Money. And if you read the story is actually a story about an investor. No one has ever purchased the shirt, but I had a designer make the shirt, and then I wrote the product description, telling the story behind the shirt to show the investor, who has now partially as a result of this become a friend. So essentially, like, memorializing his best story as a t-shirt on a website that I drive traffic to when I'm bored. And he's like, this is the most amazing gift that anyone could give me. It's like, what do you get the guy who has everything? A story. So there's a lot of different and creative ways that you can create content in the form of stories. And you can also use the medium, right? So in that case, I used a product description as a blog post. And rules are made to be broken.
So Neil asked us a question that's very related to this topic here, at least in this certain segment. And he asked, what are the different ways we can market our site and content on Reddit, and what are the key advantages to each method? So when I think about that question of what are the different ways we can market our site and the content on there, and given what you've mentioned, I think one thing that comes about is maybe interviews. I feel like interviewing people in your niche and providing value in that way might be something that somebody in our community might be able to achieve. Just because I would say that. At least in our portfolio, so we own a whole portfolio of different sites, and we are not experts in all of those fields, right? We find experts who are able to write content for us, and we pay them, we put it in, and we optimize that content for SEO and stuff like that, right? But that's kind of that's just really one part of it. So it feels like what Neil's trying to ask is how we can take that content and maybe repurpose it onto the platform for Reddit, and how to do that properly, right? Like what's some key strategies or methods that we could try ourselves that might help us get some attention?
Yeah, so there's a few different types of story, and I'll kind of stick high level. One is granular, right? So it's what the content is. So if you look up Shut Up and Take My Money, which is both a website and a subreddit, or this
and
is
an affiliate site, by the way.
Yeah, and and my site, the gift shop, the GIFSHOP.net, was modeled after Shut Up and Take My Money, which we'll get into later. I used Shut Up and Take My Money as one of my 10 guides, and then created that affiliate site for the sole purposes of using Reddit to drive traffic to an affiliate site. We'll get to that story. And so you have the content itself. And that could be what type of content it is, which is kind of hard to compete because Reddit sees everything first. So in that case, if you're just submitting content to Reddit, it's got to be the best and it's got to be first. That's a really challenging game to play. I don't recommend it, largely because I'm lazy. The second piece would be, can you present it in an interesting way? And so with the gift shop, Shut Up and Take My Money is a collection of products that fit a specific demographic. And it's using pop culture to kind of encapsulate that into a brand. And anyone who is a Futurama fan, usually like white males. I don't know his actually, their numbers, but I would imagine it's like white males in their 20s are like buying stuff from there. So it's like, if it appeals to a white male in their 20s, then like, great, put it on the site. And, that is why that's so successful. So when I was modeling it, I was like, well, I don't want to appeal to a specific demographic. I want to appeal to a specific type of humor. And what I did was, instead of choosing a niche of product, I chose a medium in which I was delivering the content, which were animated GIFs. And so I can't say that I came up with this before I launched the website, but I called it the Harry Potter of Sky Mall, or the Harry Potter Sky Mall, because it was like a Sky Mall magazine, except all of the images moved. And that was the only condition on the site, is that everything was an animated GIF. So you have, and the only products that I was selling were products that had like an interesting movement, because it needed to be animated. And so you have my favorite one is the nozzle that hooks onto a hose, and then it automatically fills 100 water balloons. And like how it hooks onto the hose, don't give a shit. Watching the water balloons fill up, meh. The thing that you care about in that, for me at least, is that moment when you shake it and 100 pre-filled water balloons fall into a bucket. And you're like, let's go, right? Because that's, you completely cut out the whole like tying 100 water balloons process. And so I think the GIF for that was like a second, and it was just looping. It was like fill, 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 drop. Oh my God, we have 100 balloons to throw. So everything was in that. So you have on one side, Shut Up and Take My Money is more about like the emotional response of, I don't care what this product is, that's just my reaction, I need it now, right? So in that, the niche is essentially an emotion. In the sense of the gift shop, the niche is the presentation. So those are two different ways that you can, at a site-wide collection level, create content. Above that would be, how's the business run and who's it run by? So what's your story? Are you, 24 and traveling the world and, maybe not making tons of money, but you have time and location freedom, and you've figured out that thing that everybody else is trying to figure out, so that you can have the ideal life that you want. If that's the case, or if you have achieved anything that your peers are, asking you, how did you do that? Then your story could be relevant to the entrepreneur community, the startup community, perhaps the business community. And that could be, here's how I sold my first affiliate site, and you could do an AMA, and detail your story and then do an AMA. So you have content kind of level, and you have business level. And then I would say, independent of that, access. So Redditors love what is new, what is first, what is best, what is over-engineered, what is unnecessarily engineered. So my kind of like mantra is, my archetype, I guess, is meticulously ridiculous, which I stole that term from TJ Miller and bought the domain, so suck it. HBO is not smart enough to buy it. And so that's what the Facebook prank was, meticulously ridiculous. It was exceedingly over-enginered, just for a prank, right? Like, I mean, it was, at the end of the day, it was a prank, but I spent a lot of time on it, and it was fun. So if you have someone in your industry that the people in a subreddit that's related to that do not have access to, then the value that you bring is the value of this other person's story or access. And the other component to that is that you have to have the ability to translate. So I do AMAs for clients a lot of times, and most of what I'm doing is research, which is essentially like getting a drink or two in them and asking them about their life. Like tell me the good shit, right? Like I have to get through all of the like, well, I have this agency. No. Tell me about your first 3 companies that failed. Oh man, my wife was the CEO so that we could land, this deal that, they have to service minorities. So I placed her as the CEO. And then when we got divorced, she stole the company. And then my next one that was actually someone. And so like show me the battle scars, right? Because that's what the Redditors want to hear. Not the like perfectly poised version that's now standing in front of you. And so do the research, I'll write the copy, and then I'll coach them and say, when someone asks a question, you answer it directly, be frank. Be frank, be specific. Don't say, oh, we've worked with a lot of clients that do X, Y, and Z. No, it's like, well, we worked with Snoop, and when we worked with Snoop, this happened. So it's a lot of like, talking to them about what NDAs they can't violate, and then basically just coaching them. So if you want to bring someone else's story or content in through your channel, then you've got to learn how to communicate on behalf of a Redditor, and essentially kind of like predict what questions they're going to ask, which once you click into the community, you'll start to understand what that is.
I think that makes a lot of sense. The one thing, so we have a tiny bit of experience in Reddit just from the different websites that we own, so that we're trying to promote some stuff on it, right? And from what we've seen is that there's certain communities who are very accepting of a brand profile, we'll call it. Mm-hmm. And then there's some communities that are, they're like, get out of here. We don't want anything to do with you because your username is a brand. But sometimes we do actually, we do find engaged people inside of some subreddits or some niches that happen to welcome the fact that we're a brand, and we're not really sure why. I think it's mostly to do with the fact that the content's just good. I'm pretty sure that they're just looking past that aspect of it. But in your opinion, so like, let's say there's, so I'm sure there's people in our audience, and the first thing that they're going to do is when they decide of what to do for how to get their website seen by Redditors, is decide whether or not they're going to be a brand or whether they're going to be I don't know, maybe be themselves and pretend that they don't own the website, or all the different ways that somebody would try to promote themselves, either not transparently, whether or not that matters to them, or transparent in the fact that that the brand is more upfront, I suppose.
Yeah, and the answer is it depends. The answer with anything Reddit related is usually it depends. And so Reddit's rules are that you can only have one account. I would say a lot of people have multiple accounts. There's a variety of reasons for that. But the one that I recommend is that you should have an account. You personally should have an account. It should not be your name. It should be something that is meaningful to you, or something totally random. It doesn't really matter. Mine is fuck apathy, because I like that as like a piece of guidance, embrace expression, like don't, hide behind apathy. I own the domain. Someone gave me a t-shirt with that on it years ago, and I thought it was cool. And so that's my profile. In addition to that, I have one for Ghost Influence. So I have one as me and one as the company. Now, Ghost Influence is a Reddit marketing agency. So we talk about Reddit, we talk about marketing. We speak in a voice, right? Like that is poised, but also irreverent, because it fits that weird professional, but also Redditor. So always wearing a lot of hats. The reason that I recommend one personal and one professional is because your personal one should be you. And that's how you learn. If you have a French bulldog, go to the fucking Frenchie community and talk about how adorable the Frenchies are, because you're not practicing. I mean, you are practicing, you are learning the community, but it's also what you genuinely are interested in. So if you look at my profile, fuck apathy, it's like, motorcycles, our Tinder, screenshots of terrible conversations, marketing community sometimes. I'm kind of a big deal on the succulents community. No, I'm just kidding. I have like 2 posts on the side. The succulents community is honestly really fun. And there's like a few things that I engage in, and a few things that I contribute to that are just who I am. Like, damn, that's interesting, or mildly infuriating, or stuff like that, where I'm just like, you find something in the world that fits the mold, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna submit this. A buddy of mine showed me a picture of his dog, and I was like, that's adorable. And I was like, can you send that to me? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then I think it was 60,000 upvotes, which is something in the range of like and then it went to like Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and got parodied 1 million times over. So it's like at 100 million views or something stupid. His ex-girlfriend is like, I see our dog everywhere. It's not fair. So So personal account, in order to learn the community and learn the language and just be the non-business version of you, promoting a business through Reddit, regardless of how you do it, be it through telling them your story or providing customer service or creating interesting content, it doesn't matter, is harder than just being a Redditor. So just be a Redditor first. Learn how Redditors act. Learn how like you find good content. Learn how you engage in the comments. And then once you do that, you'll know better what to do on your branded profile. But a lot of times I see brands make mistakes. There we go. Wow.
We're not even going to edit that out.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I sneeze.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a client recently that went with my recommendation, but went with it too eagerly. And they ended up getting suspended, which happens if you make a mistake, right? You get a warning. They didn't tell me about that. They don't know why. And they continued doing it, and they got banned. And so now their branded account is banned. So they can't use their brand name on Reddit anymore. They can't create a second account with that brand name. And if they do create a second account with a similar brand name, blah, 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 whatever, then all the moderators and administrators are going to be able to see that and know that they have multiple accounts. Plus the fact that their original account, if you go to it, says suspended. So you don't want to learn with a branded account. You want to use a branded account in certain circumstances, but definitely don't learn with it.
Nice. So there's the investment that you need to understand Reddit on a personal level, just to
as a Redditor.
Just to be a Redditor, yeah, exactly. Just to be a Redditor, which to me makes a lot of sense. I personally have I have a Reddit account, and I think it's got to be like 6 years old now, with tons of karma points and all that stuff. But actually, one question I think is going to pop up into people's minds is the fact that, so we just talked about whether you should be starting your profile as a branded account or as a personal account, and you said to start two. So start
one.
Or sorry, yeah,
and do that for a while, and then get to the business one later.
Yeah. So the personal one for sure, and I think it makes sense too, just because you can still promote your content and all that stuff under your personal Reddit profile, just because it's. Number one, people can see into your history and see that you're an actual Redditor, and you're contributing to all these different subreddits. And then the fact is just that even though it is called your personal account, it's actually not. It's still somewhat of an anonymous type of profile there.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, like, I'll post stuff that's identifiable all the time, and I will tell people my username. And that reveals a lot about me, but I also will jump into like conspiracy conversations where someone will like find me mentioned in a Forbes piece and be like, it's a conspiracy that corporations are taking over Reddit. Look at this guy as an example. He's an asshole. And then I'll just like show up 10 seconds later because I have brand monitoring going. And I'm like, what's up? I'm that guy. Like, what questions do you have? Happy to answer anything. And then I'll just, like, that's how I kind of became a Reddit marketing expert, was I got featured in Forbes as a Reddit marketing expert. And then it blew up on the conspiracy and the hell corporate subreddits. And I just showed up and I was like, what's up? Like, what do you need? And just sat there and answered questions. And they're like, fuck you. And I'm like, oh man, I know a lot of marketers are really assholes, and they just like have no regard for the platform that they're communicating on, and they just want to make money. And I was like, a lot of what I do is really trick companies who are thinking like that into giving, their money to an endeavor that is creation-based and to make something entertaining or educational or whatever. And they're like, oh. And like over the course of 6 hours, they went from like, all right, fuck every marketer who's not this guy. And it was, so sometimes being public on Reddit can be an advantage. Gallo Boob is the most prolific Redditor of all time. I think he has like 23 million karma. and his name is Robert. He posts pictures of himself all the time, and so people know who he is. That is both a blessing and a curse, which is a totally different conversation.
Oh yeah, definitely. So let's think about this then. So we're at the stage where we've got a personal profile, let's say, because I think that's where most people are at. Should we create our own subreddit for our own niche that we have a content site on?
If there's nothing else like it, and you have a defined niche that is not, I would say, an analytical niche, so not vests for puppies, which is great for SEO because who else sells vests for puppies? But it's something that, so there's the aw subreddit, and then there's aw what the fuck. So it's AWWWTF. So it's both adorable and makes you like kind of jump back. And then there's aw-spirational, which is adorable and inspirational. So like there's a lot of things on things. If you look around and you say, all right, well, shut up and take my money, like I found that and I said, I can create a website like that. And I made a shut up and take my money for women in their 20s, not men in their 20s. There's not a ton, statistically speaking, there's not a ton of women on Reddit. So if you were to do the, shut up and take my makeup money, that's obviously not someone within that demographic creating that, but you probably would have a hard time getting people to follow it. So I would say that there are rare instances where it is worth the time and energy needed to create and popularize a subreddit. Creating a subreddit takes 10 minutes. Making it look pretty takes an hour. Popularizing it takes months, if not years. So if you have a way of moving people over, if you have an ad budget, you can do paid ads for your subreddit. I would say it depends. It depends on what the content is. And that's a non-answer, but I would look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, is this really great content?
Yeah, and decide whether or not you are going to stick with it as well, because I think that's a big point there. So one thing I think that kind of correlates with this whole talk about whether or not a brand should start their own subreddit, I think has to do with the fact that of how people even use Reddit itself, right? Like myself, I tend to go straight into a specific subreddit that I'm looking for. I don't think that that's probably the normal thing that people do. So what is the normal way that somebody goes on Reddit as a user of like an audience member, let's say, sorry, not when I say audience member, I mean the audience member of Reddit.
Right.
Yeah, like a user of Reddit.
Statistically speaking, the majority of people browse all or popular or any of the aggregates. So when you submit something to a subreddit, it gets voted up that subreddit, and then all of the subreddits all of the content from all the subreddits is collected together into our all, which is every subreddit. And then there's your home, which is all of the content from all of the subreddits that you have subscribed to. So there's individual subreddit, aggregate of all of your subreddits that you choose to follow, and then aggregate of all subreddits. So like I don't follow Dragon Ball Z, but if I go into the R all and there's something that's like amazing Dragon Ball Z and it pops up, I'm like, I don't get the joke. Or like, Skyrim, I used to be a big gamer. I'm not a big gamer now. So if I go to R all and I see anything like online gaming, I usually just don't get the joke. But then when I go to my feed, it's all the things that I subscribe to, and then everything is just like the best thing ever. So yeah, that's usually how people browse. So what you're doing is you're trying to essentially get bandwagon effect, where people are voting in your subreddit and have enough momentum there that it bumps up in the aggregate. And that's when you start to get people who are not subscribed to your subreddit seeing your subreddit.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I am thinking right now what might be interesting to go into is your some of your best, we'll call them experiments, perhaps some of your best experiments that you've done on Reddit, being the true Redditor that you are, right?
Experiments for content or experiments for profit?
Let's go with profit, because I think profit is something that is interesting for everybody.
So my two favorite ones are the giftshop.net, GIF, no T. Well, I'd say three: giftshop.net, mastersofirreverence.com, and yourplacetonight.com. And the gift shop I talked about a little bit. It was an affiliate site designed to be entertaining as a window shopping experience. And I had, I think, 156,000 page views from 2 submissions over the course of 24 hours, $0 in paid ad spend, 2.8% conversion rate to Amazon. And then Amazon banned me because I was astroturfing. They didn't use that word, but that. Because I was like, here's a 55-gallon drum of lube on Amazon, and then everybody's like, wait, really? And then they'd click it, and then I'd get the cookie, and then I would, yeah. So don't do that. Lesson learned.
Those are good things to know, by the way.
Yeah, well, the thing too is, weirdly, if you tell Amazon, at least this is how it used to be, is that if you tell Amazon that you're about to drive a massive amount of traffic, then they'll be like, okay, we won't flag it. So it was not alerting them, and then also like I was linking to some of the products as I was making fun of them. So not promoting them. It was kind of like unpromotion, which is great for content, not so great for affiliate terms of service. So that the other one would be Masters of Irreverence, which I haven't driven a ton of traffic to, but I've been doing some paid ads, and those have been starting to convert because Reddit's ad interfaces newly updated, and I would say with their new redesign is newly actually effective. I haven't advocated for paid advertising on Reddit for years, but in the last probably 6 months I've started to. And then the third is Your Place Tonight, which was submitted to Internet is Beautiful, which is kind of single page websites and other content. And it was my buddy and I got drunk and tried to come up with the most absurd email address to give out at a bar, then made this. And it is a novelty email forwarding software that allows you to register whatever email you would like at yourplacetonight.com and have it forwarded to your actual email so that you can use it as a pickup line. I think we had 11,000 page views and 660 email signups in the first 30 minutes. So that was fun.
That was
tied off to it's changed now, but it was the Reddit hug of death prevented by InMotion hosting. So it was like a very, very blatant affiliate link. And people were like, well done, sir. Well, because they were just like, isn't that presumptuous? But fair, because this is amazing. And it was just very...
Can we go? What was this Reddit hug of death? This hosting thing?
Reddit hug of death is a term used by Redditors for when Reddit drives so much traffic so quickly that it crashes the server that it's going to. And so when I came up with this idea, I was like, all right, well, who would pay me to make this, essentially? And so I came up with the idea. Then I asked that question. I was like, well, Reddit's going to drive a ton of traffic. Like, this is definitely going to hit the front page. It's definitely going to get hugged to death. But if I know in advance that it's going to be hugged to death, then I can build a server that's capable of handling that. And so I started looking around, and took my developers, because I don't code, I just manage coders. It took my developers like a weekend to build the actual software. And then it took us 4 months to find a web hosting company that could get their head out of their ass and tell us how much they could actually handle. Everyone's like, oh, we have the best servers, the best uptime. I'm like, how many concurrents can you withstand? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'll have to ask my engineers. And then we went through like 6 hosting companies and doing load testing, and it was a pain in the ass. Highly recommend InMotion. Feel free to use my affiliate link.
And that's at yourplacetonight.com.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so it's a process. and you learn. And I think we're getting up on the end, not to cut off, but I poorly scheduled a call immediately after. So making sure we got through all of our questions. The other thing I wanted to share is what are the different ways you can market? Optimal
Marketing
way to
campaigns?
search for related content. Question from Neil. Neil is asking, what's the optimal way to search for related content in subreddits? Basically stating that Reddit's search engine is shitty, which it is. So two things. Number one is if you're on Reddit and you search site, S-I-T-E, colon, any website, you can find any content from that website that's been submitted to Reddit. So if you do site:instagram.com, you can see any Instagram submissions that have been effective on Reddit. If you do site:instagram.com/a username, you can see all of the links going out to that specific user. Aside from that, I would recommend using Google and doing Google site:reddit.com and then whatever you want to search, because Google search of Reddit is far more powerful than Reddit search within. And that's probably my best pro tip that I can encapsulate very briefly.
Awesome. Well, I won't take too much of your time here. Thanks a lot, Brian, for hanging out with us today, giving us tons and tons of Reddit advice. I think at the end of the day, it's about being long-term, thinking long-term, and really, well, to be honest with you, just caring about the people that are on the platform, because they don't want to see your BS. They just want to see the real stuff that is going to make them laugh.
Yeah, and understanding that what's going to make them laugh is, make sure that it's up to their standard. Cool. And thanks so much for having me on and letting me share. And if anyone has questions, I'm ghostinfluence.com and happy to answer and share resources. I have a giant wiki of information. Always love sharing.